Hi, welcome to the Kindle Chronicles. This is episode 571 on July 12th, 2019, coming to you from Ocean Park, Maine. My guest this week is Bradley Metrock, CEO of Score Publishing, and that's the group which purchased Digital Book World and brought it to Nashville last year for the first time, and it's coming up on the second Digital Book World in Nashville is coming up in September. I really enjoyed attending last year and appreciating the changes that Bradley's team made to the conference, so I thought it'd be a good time to talk to him about what's ahead this year.
This is a very unique conference. There's nothing quite like it. And it's time well spent for anybody who touches in any way publishing or technology.
I'll also have some news stories for you this episode, as well as a couple of tech tips. Let's jump in. With Prime Day coming up in 3 days, July 15th and 16th, I thought you might be interested in a story which I came across by Chris Walton. He's a retail strategist and pundit who has been on the show before. He wrote in Forbes, "Don't be surprised if Amazon Prime Day starts to happen every month." This is pretty creative stuff that Chris has put together. He's a Harvard Business School grad and spends a lot of time just watching Amazon and the rest of the retail structure. What he has teased out of pretty careful study of Jeff Bezos and Amazon and how they work is the idea that Amazon already knows what types of things it's going to be doing with Prime Day or Prime Day-like promotions over the next 3 years out in front of the competition. And this is now year 4 for Prime Day. So if Bezos is true to his word, Chris writes, the next 3 incarnations of Prime Day are already baked. In other words, Amazon has pretty much of an idea what it's going to look like. His first idea of what this might look like is a preemptive Prime Day in November. The idea here is that since everybody gets geared up for Black Friday sales after Thanksgiving, what if Amazon were to jump in ahead of that and have a spectacular sale, the kinds of sales and discounts that we normally see on Black Friday coming before Thanksgiving? And in that case, because it can move much more quickly and because it would be setting the date maybe a week or two ahead, all the rest of the stores that try to kind of target in on this retail frenzy of Black Friday would be caught flat-footed, and lots of people would have been buying things sooner than they went on sale at Macy's and Target and Walmart and everywhere else. He calls that, as Death Star devastating as that might be, the other idea is possibly even more likely, and that is that Amazon would simply have a Prime Day every month. He notes that the Prime Day this year starts July 15th, and that is the day a lot of people receive their paychecks. What if Prime Day becomes a regular occurrence on the 1st and 15th of every month? Is that outside the realm of possibilities? Not in the slightest, he says. And a Prime Day on those days every month certainly would be within the ethos of Amazon's core values, and all of the logistics and what I saw at the warehouses could be geared up to have those kinds of sales hit pretty quickly and be pretty deep and wide in terms of what was being offered. Walmart is at least 4 years behind Amazon's Prime Day experimentation, Chris writes, so he thinks that this could be something that would really just put Amazon in a whole different category. I think one question to ask is, how would customers react to that? I enjoy the hype of a summer 2-day sale. I don't know if I would really rise up if it was happening on the 1st and the 15th of every month. So that part, I mean, Chris probably sees more customer surveys than I do, but just in thinking of my own way of reacting to Prime Day as it is, I'm not sure it'd be transferable if it became that much more frequent. Now, if it was moved up a little before Thanksgiving, I mean, who says Black Friday has to be the big day for shopping? And if Amazon were to play around with that one, that seems a little bit more possible to me. In any event, Prime Day is just around the corner, and I'll see what comes up. I did hear from Mark Roberts, who was questioning my statement that I haven't ever regretted a Prime Day purchase, and he rightly points out that I bought kind of a Segway-type scooter that was remarkably cheaper than the first one I bought in Denver when they first came out. But you had to balance on it, and you moved it with your knees. It didn't come up and be a full-scale thing that you had handlebars with, and it was terrifying, and I thought I could really hurt myself on this. I sent it back. I'm not sure I consider that a regret, though, because I did have a chance to try it here on Dune Street at Ocean Park a little bit, traveled around, and then I boxed it up and said, hey, it's not good for somebody over 65, and I'm sending it back, and they did a refund. Sharp observation on Mark's part to recall that there was a time, at least, when I made a major purchase and did have to send it back. We'll see. The the grill that I want to buy for the cottage here, and the electric scooter, we'll see. I think the electric scooter is fading, but if it comes out, it's going to be hard to resist. Second story is, this comes from listener David Enzel that sent me a link to a podcast, and it's Peter Kafka on the Recode Media podcast, interviewing someone who worked at Amazon for 4 years, 2010 to 2014, and in July of 2017, after doing some other work at Vimeo, has become the CEO of Vimeo. I'm going to play you a little bit from this interview because I always enjoy asking the question, is Amazon for real? Customer obsession, all of the things that we hear. And sometimes when you see an Amazon executive leave the company and go somewhere else and then talk about Amazon in ways that affirm or maybe not the corporate culture, which is so carefully presented each time you talk to somebody from Amazon. And in this case, I think it holds up pretty well. See what you think. The new Vimeo CEO's name is Anjali Sud, and she had been director of marketing at Amazon before moving to Vimeo, which is a video startup company. It's been around for quite a while now, but it's a company which she says has a lot of potential.
I think for me, it was more that the job I started at Amazon wasn't the one I wanted to be doing. It was just the one that was closest to my skill set. And then I basically got in, and then I effectively, tried to do a really good job and then say, hey, is there any way you can help me transition into the thing I really want to do? And ultimately, I was able to do that. And I got to try a lot of different things at Amazon. And look, I think one of the things about that company, and there's obviously lots of opining and discussion around Amazon's culture, but one of the things I found from my experience is they were very comfortable giving people opportunities to do things they hadn't done before.
Let's stop there and consider what she said so far, the idea of going to Amazon, doing well somewhere, and then having a chance to go somewhere else within the company that was more suited to her interests and perhaps skills. That, I think, is a part of the culture you see in things like the dramatic announcement Amazon made this week about all the training that they're going to be offering to employees to basically help them get into AI and other aspects of the changes that are going to be coming in the workforce with robotics, and spending, I think it's $700 million of training to help people keep staying at Amazon or get jobs elsewhere. So that story that the Vimeo CEO is telling seems to fit something that you hear in several different aspects of the company. The other thing she mentions in this clip, which we'll hear now, has to do with whether or not the focus on the customer really is a real thing or if it's just talking points.
What does the Amazon experience teach you about what you're doing now?
It's all the classic stuff. I think first and foremost, it all starts with the customer. Amazon was always, and they talk about it, but they really do walk the walk on that. You have to understand the customer, and if you're not adding value to the customer, like, what are you marketing? That was a big one for me. And it actually, when I got to Vimeo, I spent a ton of time talking to creators. And that's when it first started to click that there's this pain point and friction that they're experiencing. And the tools were not there that were solving it.
When she's talking about creators, she's talking about video creators, which is what people use Vimeo for, is to create and store and share and distribute video. And there's a nice, concise tribute to Amazon's culture that she says is for real when they talk about the customers. And in fact, she had soaked enough of it in to have it be of use to her at another company. And pretty interesting. Some more on that story about the retraining, which was announced on July 11th. They are going to spend $700 million to retrain about a third of the American workforce at Amazon to do more high-tech tasks. And it's an acknowledgement that advances in technology are remaking jobs in nearly every industry, and that workers will need to adapt or risk being left behind. And this is a story in the New York Times by Ben Castleman and Adam Satariano. When we toured the warehouse in Fall River, Mass., they again talked about how the training programs that are available for Amazon employees at places like the warehouses, I think that this recent program kind of builds on that. They've always had the ability for people to learn a different career or learn a different skill and have Amazon pay for that. If it results in them staying in the company, fine. And if it results in them being happier somewhere else, that's okay as well. So the program that was announced this week was really kind of extending it and quite a dramatic level of scale to the initiative. I've got a couple of tech tips to share with you. One hit me on the beach here last week. I was reading my Kindle Paperwhite, the new Paperwhite, relatively new, and I was in a book that had a diagram that was very handy to refer back to. So I set up a bookmark for the diagram, and then when I would be reading a few pages ahead of the diagram and I wanted to go back to it, it turned out to be very easy if I made a bookmark. And I haven't done that many bookmarks in my Kindle books, but for this particular case, it turned out to be really very slick. And what made it even better was that on the Paperwhite, and this would be the same on the Oasis, when I hit the bookmark page, it pulled up this image of the diagram as kind of an overlay, so I could see behind it the text that I was reading, and I didn't actually have to switch all the way to the diagram where I'm kind of jumping between pages in the book. It was giving me a chance to see the diagram at the same time I hadn't really left the page that I was studying at the moment. So the design of bookmarks on the Kindle devices looks like it's quite elegant and quite useful, probably for all kinds of different situations, especially I'm sure if you were a student and you were actively reading books and needing to do some learning as you're doing the reading. When I compared it with how bookmarks work on the Fire HD8, the color display and the non-e-ink Kindle, it wasn't as handy because when the bookmark window came up, it covered the diagram that I was using for. So I couldn't actually use the partial view of it. I had to actually open up that page that had the diagram and then switch back to the page that I was reading. Not as great. I think that's another example of how Amazon would be wise to try to have a little more uniformity in how things like bookmarks work across the different devices. One thing I do like about bookmarks is that as opposed to when they first came out, when you set a page as a bookmark, when you pull up the list of bookmarks, you can see the name of the chapter. I think it would be even better if you could customize that. If you had, in this case, I might have changed the name of that bookmark so it would say diagram. And then I would know exactly what I was going back to when I was trying to find that page. But it did make it easier enough for me to find it by identifying the name of the chapter that that diagram had shown up in. Another tip I'll pass along, and this is one which I'm going to be helping my father set up because he loves to read his Kindle books on his iPhone, and that's his preferred way of. He does have a Kindle, but he really doesn't use it because he so much prefers to be reading on the iPhone. The problem is that if he gets an idea for a book that he wants to buy, it's a little tricky to buy it on the iPhone. And in fact, if you're on the Kindle app on an iPhone or an Android device, you can't just go in and look for a book and then buy it when it comes up the way you could if you were on a Fire tablet or one of Amazon's e-ink Kindles. This is because of the way Apple charges commissions for people that sell things through their apps. So there is a way to, for a workaround that's kind of elegant, and I'm looking forward to setting this up for Dad. What you would do is on your iPhone, you'd open Safari, and then you would navigate to Kindle Store. If you just type in Kindle Store for Google, then you'll get to that page. And so now you're looking at the page where you can search for any Kindle book that you're looking for. There is an icon that's a little box with an arrow pointing up out of it. This is how it looks on the iPhone. And if you click on that, then you click on Add to Home Screen. And this creates a link to that Amazon page from which you can search for books and buy books with no problem. You'll have to enter your Amazon login and password. And as you set up this link, which will end up appearing on the home screen of your phone, you might rename it something like Buy Kindle Books. I think that's what I'm going to do for Dad. And so once I did that, and I tried this on my iPhone, I moved that icon right next to the Kindle icon on the iPhone, just to sort of remind me that if I'm reading a book and there's an idea to buy something, I'll get out of the Kindle app, and then I go back into this icon, which I named Buy Kindle Books, and then I'll be able to buy it. Once you buy it within the Safari page that took you to Amazon's site without using an app that is controlled by Apple on the iPhone, then the book will show up in the Kindle app, and it'll be in the cloud, and you can pull it down to the device, and everything's pretty hunky-dory at that point. Dad has grumbled about this in the past. He's 92, and he's amazingly adept with his iPhone and other devices. But I think this is going to make it easier for him to buy books on his iPhone. I look forward to doing that for him the next time I'm down where they live outside Boston to help him out with it. Time now for the interview. Bradley Metrock is CEO of Score Publishing in Nashville, which last year presented its first digital book world after acquiring the prestigious conference the year before. I had attended previous DBW events in New York City, and I greatly enjoyed seeing it repurposed in the Music City with a wide and useful lineup of speakers and sessions. I am registered to attend Digital Book World again, September 10th through 12th, and so I was curious to hear from Bradley how it's shaping up. I spoke with him by Skype on Monday, July 8th, and that was 64 days before Digital Book World begins, and I began by asking if that seemed like a lot or a little amount of time given what needs to be accomplished between now and the start of the show.
I'll take the Goldilocks approach, just right. We're right on schedule. Maybe in some senses, we wish there was a little bit more time. Everybody always wants a little bit more time, but we're excited about Digital Book World, the program. The last parts of it are coming together. Today we announced the Bloom Library is joining us. That's a really interesting addition. We've got some very interesting additions we'll be announcing toward the end of this week and the next week. So we're excited. We're building something that people appear to want to attend, and people enjoyed in the past, and we think it's going to go well.
What was your attendance last year, which is the first year of the show since you purchased it from the previous owners?
Yeah, so we had somewhere between 500 and 600 registered attendees last year. That was up roughly triple what it was over the year before we acquired it.
Fantastic.
So it was definitely revitalized from that standpoint, as well as several others. that's just not us talking. That's a lot of the feedback we received.
What's your target for attendance this time?
It's going to be more. It's a matter of how much more. We're capped by the Loews Vanderbilt Hotel in ways that we weren't capped with the Music City Center. But it's a better venue for us. The Music City Center is a cavernous place. It was fine for last year, but this will be certainly a more intimate environment. I believe it will serve our purposes better for what we're trying to do.
That sounds great. How far apart are they in Nashville?
So they're no more than 5 minutes apart.
Yeah.
They're sort of on the opposite ends. The Music City Center is sort of on the southwestern side of downtown, and the Loews Vanderbilt Hotel is sort of on the north side, if I got my directions right. So it's a little bit, but not too bad.
Yeah. Now, I registered at the hotel, I think, just within the past few days, and it looked like you had a rate at the hotel for people attending Digital Book World savings. Are those rooms still available, or there's still time for people to get a cheaper room because of that?
There is, yeah. And, if people are looking to attend Digital Book World, which certainly we know there will be a lot of folks registering over these next 64 days, the room block with discounted rooms at the Loews will be intact for probably the next 3 weeks, assuming it doesn't run out. I don't really know what the status of it is, but it'll be there for about the next 3 weeks or so, and then it's going to go away. And you'll definitely pay more there or somewhere else at that point.
Yeah, looks like a really nice hotel.
Oh, it's great. It was already nice to begin with, and then they did a huge multi-million-dollar renovation of it. It's great.
When you think of potential attendees of the conference by job or where they fit in the whole publishing digital world, what's your image of the person who's likely to get the most out of attending Digital Book World this year?
I think the person who would get the most out of attending is someone who either doesn't know much about technology or is just sort of at the introductory phases of learning, because then it's all upside. But the reality is that at Digital Book World, the way we put the program together, it's nothing but insight waiting around every corner for people who work for publishers, who are publishers, who work for technology companies that serve publishers, anybody involved in any sort of content creation of any kind. There's a lot to be had because the world's sort of bursting open in terms of publishing, and the definition of the word book, bursting open, means all sorts of different things to different people. And whether it's for you or your company or your organization or whatever, there's a lot out there that could benefit you to know. And whether it's tools, whether it's best practices, whether it's different approaches for different things, whether it's trends that we're seeing. This is a very unique conference. There's nothing quite like it. And it's time well spent for anybody who touches in any way publishing or technology, whether they work for a formal publisher or not.
Yeah. I remember you told me last year when we were talking about the conference that you thought a conference like this needs to be reinvented on a regular basis. And I think we'd maybe reference South by Southwest, which I think is an example of a conference that manages to do that. Were you conscious in designing this year's conference of ways in which you were reinventing the experience?
Yeah, I was. And, one of the big things when we acquired Digital Book World, which is a conference that had been around since 2009, is that toward the end of its tenure with the previous owner, a common refrain was, it's the same people talking about the same thing. And we can't repeat that. We want to be making new mistakes, Lynn. We don't want to make the old mistakes again. And so one thing that we did is we were very conscientious to not have very many speakers return from the previous year, and get a bunch of new blood in there. I think it's probably a solid 80% of the program will be brand new to Digital Book World for the first time.
Yeah, that's smart.
And 85 to 90% was not on the docket last year, probably upwards of 90%. So, and the only reason someone would be returning from last year is if there was something substantially different, or there's a good reason for it. And so, it keeps it fresh. It's not change for change's sake. What's going on, the velocity of publishing and technology, the velocity of the way the world's moving, it makes it easy to have that approach as long as you embrace it, and we did.
When you think of the people that you signed up to give workshops or presentations, can you think of one that when you first had the idea, you might have thought, boy, that's a little bit out there. That's really on the edge of what people would expect to be here, but I'm going to take a chance. What's, a risky choice that people might take away from it. I like this because this guy's clearly taking chances.
We've got a number of those. We have some of those every event that we do, and we've got a group called the COCO Foundation, COKO, and these folks, their entire mission is figuring out how to leverage technology to share information better and easier. At its core, it's really an educational-oriented organization. But the reality is that publishers of any kind, of any size, could look at what they're doing and walk away with a number of insights on how to improve some of the things that they do. We just announced today a group called Bloom Library, which is a part of a nonprofit called SIL. And Bloom Library, their entire mission is to, their mission statement, their slogan is, let's grow a library. And their mission is to use technology to facilitate the creation of libraries in minority population areas and countries. And when I say minority, I really don't mean that in an American sense. I mean that in an international sense, from a language standpoint. These tribal languages, these languages that aren't spoken by that many people, relatively speaking. Sure, maybe they've got a library of 2 books, but it's like, there's limits to how valuable that is. What they really need is the deployment intelligently of certain types of tools that exponentially increase not only the available books, but the availability to create books in that language, in those languages. So super interesting group of people doing that. And I think that there's a lot of interesting things to glean from what they're doing as well. And so, there's things that are sort of out there on the fringe. And then there's things like what, Simon & Schuster is doing with Alexa with the Stephen King Library, or things like what the National Book Foundation is doing in general to support literacy and reading and digital publishing, print and digital. I could go on and on and on. The United States Copyright Office is sending their top person, the 13th ever Register of Copyrights, I think is her title. And she's the first African American to hold that role. And she's coming to give an exclusive talk at Digital Book World. Her name is Karen Temple. And so Audible will be there. It's the first time I believe they've been at Digital Book World. So, I could go on and on, but it's easier to go to digitalbookworld.com and have a look around. And it's, like I said, if you're in this space, you find any of this stuff of interest, you think you're getting in this space, this is worth every penny.
There's one that caught my eye. I was impressed with, among many, is the Penguin Random House audio book. And it looked like it was somebody fairly high up, or maybe 2 people. What are they going to be talking about in that session?
So I believe that Penguin Random House publishes the most audiobooks of any organization each year for the last few years. And they've got a number of workflow related insights and just how they conduct themselves operationally just makes them really interesting. And so, yeah, we're very pleased to have them.
Now, when Penguin Random House publishes an audiobook, are they competing with Audible, or does that simply become one of the books that Audible can put out to its members?
I see you need to be in the session. But I believe what they do is, I don't know if they decide on a case-by-case basis. I don't think that they have got any sort of relationship with Amazon to where they feel like they have to do something. But I think most audiobooks that they produce and release do end up on Audible, either at the very beginning or at some point.
Yeah, it makes sense because it gives them wider distribution.
Sure.
Yeah. You, I think, mentioned last time in envisioning the show and also just the previous Digital Book World, some of the critique in all of those feedback forms that you went through, that in the exhibit hall, it's not as exciting if it's all small and medium exhibitors as opposed to having a couple of big anchor booths that can really add some excitement. Have you had a chance to line some folks up like that for the exhibit hall?
We do have a couple of bigger players, LSC Communications, which just, I believe that their acquisition of whoever the second largest printing company is getting nixed by the United States government.
Oh,
I'm not sure what the status of that merger is, but they're going to have a booth on the floor. In all likelihood, Ingram will have a booth on the floor. There may be one other shoe to drop. We'll have to see. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some bigger companies. Now, the thing about this year that's different is that with the environment at the Loews Vanderbilt Hotel, it's not like the Music City Center where you've got to have these gigantic punctuation mark booths. It's going to be a little bit different of a vibe, but no doubt there's going to be some larger companies, some mid-sized companies, and some small ones. It'll be a healthy diversity amongst the exhibits.
Yeah. One of the highlights for me last year was Data Guy's presentation. You got to see who he was when he used to be anonymous. Are you going to be talking to him in the next 64 days to get him back, or is that part of not repeating things?
It's the latter. He did a very good job. Very interesting sort of capstone to the program. But that's a good example of one that we can take a year or two off from and then revisit that.
Yeah, for sure. I was also thrilled to see Mike Shatzkin on the program. You know, he organized the first Digital Book World back in 2010 or 9 years ago. And I believe he pretty much organized it and led it right up to the time that you bought it. What are you going to have him present this year?
So Mike did it for about 5 or 6 years.
Oh, okay.
So in the 2 or 3 years before our acquisition, he was not involved at all. It might have been more years than that, but consequently, that's part of the reason it was in decline, like it was. Mike has still stayed close to publishing. And, he's taken on some other causes. He does a lot with climate change, and he's a politically oriented person. But he's stayed close to publishing as well. And, it's just good timing. It's good timing for him to come back and be part of this. And, we're honored to have him join us and share, the lay of the land as he sees it in publishing.
Yeah, I think that's a nice touch. I was really glad to see that. Amazon's participation, there's the guy that Paul Kutzinger from Alexa is there. Talk about his role and what he'll be doing, and then anybody else from Amazon that's going to be participating.
Amazon is one of those where the more we can get them involved, the better. And it's for numerous reasons. It's just there's this allergy in a lot of the publishing industry to Amazon. They don't like them. They don't like talking about them. They don't like acknowledging them. And that's not a healthy way to be. And for a conference, that's a terrible way to be. And so, Amazon is a key player in the space, not just everything else they're doing, but, with Alexa specifically. And it's not like Amazon has had any sort of favoritism, any sort of bias in how they have handled one Alexa skill versus another. So from a publisher standpoint, there should be no complaints, and really there haven't been. Alexa should just be viewed as sort of a universal tool. Either deploy it or don't, but it's something that you need to know about for the optimization of your publishing catalog. So yeah, we're excited to have them back and hope to have them back on a repeated basis.
Yeah. Let's move on. You've got a couple of other big initiatives going on this week in voice. You're unlike the Kindle Chronicles, which never rests. You have a nice seasonal aspect to your show where you take some time off. I think the last show was in April, and you're going to start up again on August 22nd. That gives you, I can see the benefits of it, but do you have any kind of a new way to frame what those conversations are going to be like on the podcast when you start up with season 4?
That's a good question. So the opening guest will be Noelle LaCharity of Microsoft. We might have mentioned that. I'm not sure if we mentioned that yet or not. But we're excited to have her join us. And, I think it's going to be a good time for the show to come back. There's a lot going on. This summer, we've seen Samsung enter the space in a serious way. And whereas everything to this point has been Amazon, Google, Amazon, now it's Amazon, Google, and Samsung. And if you're a developer, you're looking to create a voice experience on your own. If you're a company looking at voice, saying, what do we need to be doing with this? Samsung has just complicated things for you because there are 500 million devices out there, can't be ignored. Nor can their developer tools and their entire philosophy on how voice works in the first place. That can't be ignored either.
Now, this is Bixby?
Yeah, this is Bixby. It's Bixby 2.0. And so that's been a major development. There's been some smaller developments this summer, but all in all, what we're seeing is a tightening. And it's something that ought to be talked about. There's a whole lot of innovation going on. Much of it is in specific verticals. But it's an exciting time. And so, yeah, we're excited to get back to it Thursday, August 22nd, and just got a great slate of guests. It's going to be fun.
If you think back within the past year, how would you describe Amazon's leadership position in the voice space now compared to a year ago?
It's eroded. Yeah, it exists, but it's eroded. So, Amazon has done a lot of great things. They've shown remarkable leadership. They invested heavily in Alexa and Echo devices when people thought they were absolute lunatics to do so. This is back in 2016, 2017. But they had a vision. And all of that legwork, they had the vision first. And then they brought on enough people to where they could execute really, really quickly. And I wrote about this on Twitter today, just about this long thread about sort of the state of voice technology. And Amazon, through a number of things that they did, gave themselves a beefy head start. But it's getting eroded. Google is they're no slouch, and they have done a number of things to catch up. They're not quite at Amazon's level in terms of market share of devices, and in terms of several metrics I could name, but they're right there nipping at the heels, really for the first time in the last 3 years. Samsung doing super interesting things. In fact, the moment Samsung hits the market, Amazon responds pretty quickly and comes out with Alexa Conversations, which is a mirror image of several key aspects of the Samsung Bixby ecosystem. So Samsung has already caused Amazon to have to do something that they, at minimum, weren't going to do then. They might have done it later.
Now, remind me what the Amazon Conversations is about. I heard about that at Remars, but what's the essence of that?
It's basically one skill connects to another in a fluid sort of way.
Oh, yeah, like it tells you're going out to dinner, so it says, do you want an Uber, and things like that.
Yeah, it's much more conversational. It's much more intelligent and fluid, and so that's the gist of it.
Yeah,
and Siri is sucking less every day, which is
that's
kind
a good
of
thing.
amazing.
Siri is sucking less, so that's you're saying the way of saying it's improving.
It is. It is.
Okay.
It is, and I'm not willing to really be that positive, but we've done several studies over 2019 in different verticals that have been aligned with some of the conferences we've done, and it's compared all the major voice assistants, and in some cases some smaller ones, and Siri has clearly improved, and these same studies have shown Cortana, which is Microsoft's voice assistant, is way more advanced than people realize, and very good. So what you're seeing is a tightening, and it will be interesting to see the types of things that these companies look to do to try to continue to differentiate themselves, whether it's through working with developers to create what they hope will be killer apps and then promoting those, or whether it'll be improvements that they make to the core foundation of how the whole thing works, or whether they just pour more marketing dollars on top of it, on top of what they're already doing. It's going to be fascinating to watch. And so, that sort of sets the stage as season 4 of This Week in Voice kicks off.
Can you imagine a time when we get comfortable enough with these devices and knowledgeable enough so that we use them for different purposes? I've got a Google Assistant device and a Siri HomePod and an Alexa on my office, and sometimes I just play around asking them all for the weather just to see if I can hear any differences in the way they respond, and with Bixby out there. But do you think it's pretty much winner take all, that they're all trying to be the voice platform, or do you think the space is likely to emerge where a smart strategy might? Because I tend to use Google if I'm after some kind of tricky information. If I'm asking kind of a smarter, more challenging question, I would probably try my Google device first. If I'm doing something that's more sort of about my life or my home, it's more sort of personal, I tend to go to Alexa. But are those kinds of personalities and use cases starting to be visible that differentiate them?
It's a good question. That's a much debated and discussed question. So, whether there's going to be one ring to rule them all, or whether there will be sort of this grab bag of voice assistants that collectively serve you over the course of the day. For me, if I'm doing something on my phone, which is a Samsung device, I'll use Google Assistant. It's right there, built into the dashboard of the device. Mm-hmm. I also have the Alexa app on my phone. I don't ask the Alexa app anything on my phone. I only ask Google Assistant because I guess that's the difference in being built into the dash versus being an app. Huh. That one extra touch means I'm just don't use it, on the device. But in my house, I don't currently have a Google device hooked up. I own some, but they're not hooked up. I've just got Alexa devices in my house, and that's what my family and I use. And so I don't know. also, I would never go so far as to say I'm representative of any group of people. I could be very unique, or maybe everybody does it this way. I really don't know. But I do feel like ultimately the bias will be toward big juggernauts.
Yeah.
Because think for a moment, we are already seeing niche voice assistants and smart speaker ecosystems being created in almost every vertical imaginable. Ones that really come to mind are banking and healthcare. And it's not that hard to imagine what's going to happen. Like there's a company, an event we do is called the Voice of Healthcare Summit. It's August 5th and 6th at Harvard Medical School. And there's a company that will be there called Lifepod. Now, Lifepod has created their own voice assistant, their own smart speaker. And it's designed to specifically be for senior citizens. And it does a lot of things really well, far beyond, what Alexa does or Google Assistant, whatever. Now, they're off to a good start. Let's assume that they continue. They're just going to get acquired, Lynn.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, the story is going to be if you're doing something that's good enough with a voice assistant to where some quorum of people are going to use that and subtract from their time using one of the mainstream ones, they're just going to get acquired and subsumed into the big ones.
Yeah.
So my feeling is that, you'll see some breakout successes in different niches or that have distinguishing features, but ultimately the world will tilt toward the big players ruling the roost.
Yeah. If you had to guess which big player wins that game, who would it be?
It's way too soon to tell.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that Amazon has going for it, Amazon's got a couple things going for it. Out of all the companies that are out of the major tech players in the space, they are at least tied for most trusted. So trust is an asset to them. And you're seeing trust starting to get in the way of Google a little bit more than what we've seen. They've stumbled over some stuff. They messed up Duplex. They've done some other stuff. They've had stories coming out about cultural rancor in their company and things like that. Trust is getting in their path a little bit. Amazon doesn't have that problem right now. And also, Amazon has a visionary leader who's been there for a long period of time, who has lieutenants that have been there for a long period of time, and they're all marching in lockstep, all in unison, that Alexa is the top priority. So, assume all other things being equal, I would probably have to handicap Amazon at least slightly in some sort of winner-take-all scenario, because what do they not have? They don't have a phone.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is people want to be using phones less. So, okay, Amazon doesn't have that important thing, but that important thing is something that people all across every socioeconomic layer collectively want to be using less.
Huh. I
I think that is okay. I think it's navigable for them. And, if I had to bet on one, if you put a gun in my head and said bet on one right now, I'd probably go with Amazon.
Interesting. Well, that I love that idea of how you see the phone, because of course they had the Fire phone, and it was one of their few and legendary flops. And it might be that a phone just isn't as valuable in the next few years, 5 to 10 years, as we might all have assumed it was going to be.
The phone is going to have a fascinating path. You see people moving away toward dumb phones. They're actually called dumb phones. And
proudly,
proudly. I wouldn't mind owning one myself. And there was a period of time when I accidentally got my iPhone made its way into a pool accidentally, and I had a dumb phone for about 3 or 4 months. It was the most peaceful, relaxing.
Your blood pressure probably went down.
I'm serious. It was phenomenal, and so I get that completely. And some people just, we're starting to wake up to what phones are doing to us.
Yeah.
They own us, and that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so that's all I can tell you is it's not sustainable. Where it goes from there, whether phone functionality is built into our clothes or whether it's something else, someone else will figure that out.
Yeah. Well, let's finish up with Project Voice. I mean, obviously that relates to what we've been talking about with Voice. That's going to be in January 13th through 17th of 2020 in Chattanooga, not Nashville. You've explained in the past that Chattanooga is kind of an unknown, powerful center of technology and a good place to have that kind of a conference. What's the most important thing you'd like to have people start thinking about now in taking a look at that event?
If you're doing anything with voice and AI, anything, you got to get there. It's going to be an absolutely essential event. There's a whole day. There's a day of pre-conference workshops. There's a day devoted to Alexa. There's a day devoted to Google Assistant, a day devoted to voice in general. And then there's working sessions for what will be the new trade association VoiceFirst.community. That'll be on Friday. That anyone's welcome to sit in and attend and be part of. So it's going to be an absolutely essential week. The idea is that, if you're working for an organization and you have been charged, you or your team have been charged with figuring out what's the lay of the land with voice and what's the lay of the land with AI, you can come for a week, invest the time, and walk away with that knowledge. Because the companies are going to be a who's who of the interesting companies doing interesting things. There's going to be 3,000 plus attendees from at least 15 countries there. It's going to be spectacular. And Chattanooga, Tennessee, home of the fastest internet in the United States, a burgeoning tech scene all of its own. Great place to have this, and encourage anybody with any inclinations in this area at all to go to projectvoice.ai and check it out.
Terrific. Last question. What's the book that has had the biggest impact on you in the past year? I know you're so busy you don't have a lot of time for sitting around with your feet up reading books, but if you think of one title that's helped you in your life or just one that was a chance to escape everything you're doing into a world that you loved being in.
That's a good question. My son is 7.5 years old, and my wife and I really have emphasized reading with him. I've spent some time reading different things with him, but one of those things has been the Harry Potter series, and spent some time reading the Bible with him as well, and rereading parts of that, and that's where I find my time. I don't know if I should be ashamed. I probably should. I mean, I wish that there were more time to read books. I do a lot of reading over the course of a day, but I don't think Twitter substitutes for
Bible.
the Bible or William Shakespeare or something. Musings on Twitter. But I will tell you, I'm also in the next couple of days going to be announcing a new book of my own that's coming out toward the end of the year, and it's going to be called the Alexa Instruction Manual, and it's going to have, I believe, 200 skills or use cases for Alexa specifically, and then I might do more in the future, different ones, but it's a big need right now with Alexa. People just use it for music. They use it for weather. They use it as a timer. They might play a podcast, maybe. And there's just so much more it can do. And I wanted to put something together that really highlighted a vast multitude of interesting skills and uses that people wouldn't know about. So I'll be announcing that in the next couple of days, maybe by the time this podcast goes live.
Good. We'll put a
Friday.
link to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
what's the title of it again?
The Alexa Instruction Manual.
Cool.
And so that will be available. I believe the release, we're looking at the last week of September or first week of October. Not sure which just yet.
Okay, fantastic. I have been speaking with Bradley Metrock, CEO of Score Publishing. Thanks very much, Bradley.
Lynn, it's an honor. Thank you for having me back.
Next week, I think I'm going to try those interviews out on the beach, which I had planned to do this week, but it didn't really work out, so I was glad Bradley was available. I normally have Friday as what I call Podcast Mount when I put the Kindle Chronicles together. Today, I was sharing the day with my other podcast, Edgecast, because I went over to New Hampshire to cover a political event, and I put up 3 episodes of my new Edgecast podcast as a result of that. That took me well into this afternoon, this evening, and I think one podcast a day is probably a better pace for me to be working at this age. But in any event, always good to talk to you, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. This is Len Edgerly in Ocean Park for the Kindle Chronicles. Bye.